So I actually got something very special to show you today. I've been waiting for a little while, but it finally came in the mail. And let me show you what I got. It's right here. A Stretch Armstrong. Back in the 1970s, the late 1970s, this was considered the hottest toy to get. In fact, even to this day, you'll find many lists of the best toys ever. It will include a Stretch Armstrong. I know the box seems pretty new, but that was actually because back in 2016, I believe, they actually did a reboot of Stretch Armstrong and brought him back, at least just the toy. So with all that said, let me go and open this up. So here, I want to see what this is all about. Now, technically, from what I have heard, this is just a bag of cornstarch, or I think it's corn syrup or cornstarch. It's one of those, but oh my God, it even has that new toy smell. There we go. Here's our boy. Here's the boy right here. A bunch of packaging. So, all right, this is a Stretch Armstrong, and it really, like, the only thing that's not stretchable though is just his head. That's like full on plastic. Here we go. Get fridge out of here. Like, you can even hear it. Like, you see, it's pretty hard. But the rest, you can actually, like, the point of it is that you could take his body, like some of his body parts, and you could just really stretch it. Give it a good, there we go. Like, it's pretty far. Like, apparently it says that it could stretch up to, like, what, 4 feet apparently? Hold on, let me just check the box. Yeah, like, I don't know, it says somewhere. Okay, maybe it doesn't say in the box, but I heard 4 feet or something. But that's the whole point of this. Oh, fudge nab, you can actually get a good exercise out of this. But I know what you're probably thinking. You're not here to see me play around with this toy, you know? I ain't a toy reviewer here. The reason why you want to come here is because you want to see me talk about a cartoon. If there's one thing that really does surprise me about Stretch Armstrong, is that there never was an animated series based on him. I mean, this was one of the hottest toys of the late 1970s where he has a whole brand with plenty of characters. Yet nobody ever thought during that time to put out a legitimate Stretch Armstrong cartoon. Random rant, I know, but you'd think he would have been a perfect fit for television animation during the 1980s when cable was dominated by animated shows based on toy lines like G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, He-Man, Transformers, and many more. And yet, Stretch's only impact on TV was with his commercials. I'm just saying it's weird that the 80s could have a whole cartoon based on a freaking Rubik's Cube and not have one for Armstrong. Technically, there were several attempts to adapt the toy, but not as an animated series, but instead as a live-action movie. But of course, many have tried, but all of them failed. Rather it be Disney's Flubber-style comedy with either Tim Allen or Danny DeVito, Universal's 3D movie with Taylor Lautner, or Relativity Media's superhero movie. There's only so much that you can do with a guy who has super stretching abilities. I mean, like, that's literally the only concept with him. Not to mention that there is that additional challenging task of finding a way to make him stand out from all the other super stretching superheroes, you know, like Mr. Fantastic or Plastic Man or whatever. Well, I mean, technically there is one, and that's just the fact that the dude is in his underwear. However, it wouldn't be until around 40 years, or more than 40 years after the toy was released, where Stretch finally has his own adventures to tell. And believe it or not, these adventures would not be shown either on the big screen or the small screen or anything like that. It was actually on Netflix. When Netflix wanted to try their hands on a Stretch Armstrong adaptation, they were thinking about making a live-action series, but amazingly, they switched their minds to be the first to consider that animation was probably the best medium for Stretch, and started by bringing on board Victor Cook along with Kevin Bork and Chris Wyatt to develop the series. By the way, I just want to go and quickly mention that Cook is actually one of the developers of the 2008 Spectacular Spider-Man series. Now, I just want to go and quickly mention that because I want you to keep that in mind, because that's going to play a significant role in this review a little later. What they came up with is more like a reboot to the whole Stretch Armstrong franchise. It has a bunch of new characters, new lore, new environments, even Stretch himself got a complete makeover where now he looks like a cousin of the Venture Brothers. The only connection the show really has with the toy is just the names of Stretch Armstrong and the villain Stretch Monster. It was only a matter of time until someone decided to go and actually make some kind of Stretch Armstrong cartoon. I mean, yeah, sure, it is kind of stupid that they would only do it decades after the toy's popularity, but still, it's just one of those things that's just bound to happen no matter what. Like, regardless of how long it would take, there was going to be some kind of Stretch Armstrong cartoon that's going to happen. But, like I said before, Stretch Armstrong is nothing more but a sack of corn syrup that is marketed as a toy. How can Netflix go and develop an entire series just on this? Well, believe it or not, they did find a way. They didn't really have a whole lot of ideas for it, but they managed to find a way. In fact, one way they brought Armstrong into animation is by turning him into not one, but a team of 3 super stretching superheroes. Imagine if you take Elastigirl from The Incredibles and split her into 3 teenage boys. There's Stretch, the one who can extend his body to great lengths, Omnimass, who can inflate parts of his body to gain super strength, and Wingspan, who could expand his body in order to fly. They accidentally got their powers when they fell into a bunch of chemicals in a restricted area, which in this case is Flexarium, the penultimate material that can almost do anything that could enhance people's lives and the people themselves. Think of it kind of like the symbiotes from Spider-Man, except it's not evil and...
Whoa.
doesn't do that. So with the help of the city's founder and renowned billionaire Jonathan Rook, they go out to stop a variety of unique bad guys and even uncover the dark truths about Charter City. I might as well start off with the show's first problem is that it doesn't leave a good first impression. As the series begins, it feels like a very generic superhero story that's just a list of the most used cliches in the genre, including the teenage origins, the mutation to gain powers, the training to use them to save people, balancing their secret superhero identity with their regular lives, and battling a set of extraordinary villains. It doesn't help either when you factor in that this is all based on a toy, leaving a sense of uncertainty of its intentions if the show wants to tell an epic story or just to sell more toys. Also, another element that was hard to get into was actually the Flex Fighters themselves. I know I already commented that they're like if you split a super stretcher into 3, but it can really feel that way because it's almost as if they're all the same character. Stretch, Omnimass, and Wingspan are all smart aleck protagonists always looking for a moment to quip, which can get more annoying than funny and probably the reason why they can't get the job done well, that also have to publicly live as high school teenagers dealing with homework and having a crush on girls as Jake, Ricardo, and Nathan respectively. Sure, they might have some qualities that differentiate them a bit, like Ricardo is more egotistical, Nathan is more of a geek, and Jake is a balance between the two while having a lot of responsibilities, but they are, for the most part, nearly one and the same with just their powers that mainly set them apart.
Hey, we got off on the wrong foot. Let's be friends. I like music. You like music. Don't think you have a ticket, buddy. Ugh. One human break coming up. I'm so gonna regret this.
Okay, so maybe we might be off to a pretty bad start here, but that's the thing with Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters. It's that, I'll say right now, a lot of the problems that it has is nothing more but just that, a bad start. That can actually be fixed by the viewer, where all they have to do is just watch the first few episodes, like maybe 4, 5, or 6 of them, and then eventually they will get used to it. Okay, now I do get it, yes. That's not necessarily a good look for the show, that it would take a lot of time before things can actually start to get good and start to get engaging. But that's actually the thing, is that it does require a lot of patience, yes, but that's kind of the beauty with Stretch Armstrong, is that when you do have patience, it actually does pay off pretty well, because after those first few episodes, that's when things start to get really interesting. At a certain point, the series does shift into a higher gear and gets more engaging with more new characters and more secrets being revealed, showing what the plot is actually all about with some unexpected twists, making it easier to see the positives of what the show can deliver. Sure, the foundation of the story may not be all that original, but there's still a good amount of creativity included and to appreciate, especially when the show does have a good balance of telling episodic stories, but also have a larger narrative happening at the same time that connects everything together throughout each season. Even the worry about the toy aspect is gone when the only thing it does is have that one small reference and that's it. But let's not forget a good dose of action with all the stretching, technology, and flexarium used for the characters to combat each other, all presented with some creative animation. It's not the best looking series on Netflix and often shows that it can have its budgetary limits, but it does get a pass to at least show the cool ideas they wanted to present with a bit of some nice CGI sprinkled in. Also, the roster of villains here are really good. Like, they could legitimately pass off as an enemy found in one of the mainstream comics with awesome abilities, fun-looking and original designs, and a solid backstory, whether it be with Smokestack, Circuit Stream, Multifarious, Mechanica, and many more. Like the trope of the attractive love interest getting into the awkward and geeky protagonist. Now, at first, it doesn't seem appealing at all, and you do question if they really are worth hanging around with. But then after you do take some time with them, and then you start to get a little bit more invested. In fact, you start to see more of the charm. And that really is the case with Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters. I was actually starting to watch it a bit, and it took me some time to get used to, or to even get into it, but then by season 2, and especially towards its end, that's when I really got invested. That's when I got really curious about what's going on, especially like regarding the plot, regarding some of its characters. Like, yeah, I was starting to actually get into it. However, there is also that chance that maybe you might know a little bit too much about the series. And then at that point, that's when it would go and start to fall apart. And yes, that actually is the case with Stretch Armstrong. Remember when I told you about the fact that this was made by one of the guys that did Spectacular Spider-Man? Looking back at that show, it was a great series. Maybe not perfect, but it was a really strong interpretation of the Spider-Man we all know and love, taking what is familiar and giving it a unique twist with an engaging plotline that's also a good fit for an animated series for the showrunners to fully let out their creativity. I remember years ago when I reviewed it and I had a surprisingly good time with— Wait, it has how many views? The only thing that truly sucks about the series is the fact that it cut off short after its second season and leaving fans with an intense and unresolved cliffhanger. Let's be honest, many of us wish that there would be a Spectacular Spider-Man Season 3, including the people who made the show, and I'm not saying this as a fact, but I can't help but feel like Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters' purpose is to be just that. It's not for anything related to the toy, but rather to make another Spectacular Spider-Man, and the more I look at the two, the more they become almost identical. Like, there is a suspicious amount of parallels going on between the two. Think about it. It has the same concept of a superhero series, the same story structure for each episode and for each season, the same leads where the Flex Fighters themselves bear strong resemblance to Peter Parker and his responsibilities, even the animation shares a similar style. I get some would say that this can constitute as a spiritual successor, and in some ways it is. However, it's hard to say that it is because its similarities are also an issue with the show. When thinking of those comparisons, it makes the series weaker than it probably is due to its intention suddenly seeming a bit clear. If it's not for merchandising, or if it's not for telling this epic tale of a bunch of teenage superheroes, then it's to try to recapture the feeling of a fan-favorite series from the past. And while they may be nice intentions, the execution is just not on par. What worked with Spider-Man is that it already had a great and beloved foundation to start off from so that the showrunners could build it up from there, and give their own unique interpretation to play around with. Stretch Armstrong is literally just a toy, and the creators were mostly left in their own hands, and even at that, the resources they made don't share the same quality. I've already mentioned that the animation is decent at best, but also the story is mostly weak where the surprise twists can be easily predicted and the plots are mainly fueled by tiresome cliches and what seems like a thoughtful moral, but they end up being used again as just quips for the Flex Fighters to use. Granted, most of that is from Season 1, and it does get significantly better and more engaging by Season 2. But still, that's more than half of the entire show that takes a lot of time to build up until it would start to get good.
It's like a Flex Fighter's work's never done.
If you three can't learn to follow orders, you won't have to worry about being Flex Fighters much longer.
It really is kind of a complex feeling that I would have with this series. Because the thing is, you know that it really wants to be like Spectacular Spider-Man. And for me personally, someone who has seen Spectacular Spider-Man and now has seen Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters, yeah, I would definitely love to have more Spectacular Spider-Man. But here's the thing though, what I want is more specifically of Spider-Man, not this. And the thing is that its most ambitious mission, like what it wants to do the most, is sadly the thing that's holding it back the most from actually being its own superhero series. And honestly, it really is too bad because the thing with the Flex Fighters is that honestly, for a series that's just based on a sack of corn syrup, it actually does have some potential. Sadly, another notable comparison to Spectacular Spider-Man is that Stretch Armstrong is a short-lived series with just 2 seasons, 23 episodes, and an interactive special between the seasons, with no signs of a third one coming anytime soon as of late 2020. And yes, the series did leave off on a cliffhanger, opening the idea of what a season 3 would be. But with the show as is on Netflix, it depends on how you look at it. On its own, Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters is an okay series that can debatably take a long time to get into, but once you get the hang of it, it can be entertaining and fun with a good dose of action, a bunch of creative and interesting characters, and a story that does eventually get engaging. But when you factor in the Spider-Man comparisons and the fact that this is based on a simple toy, the series suddenly feels more hollow where its main goal is to try to be like something that it's not, focusing more on acting like another show instead of strengthening itself to have it stand out as its own animated superhero series. My recommendation for this is that this is more for superhero fans, especially for those who love Spectacular Spider-Man. It does its job to supply some entertaining crime-fighting action, but don't expect Stretch to be on par with some of the other mainstream heroes. My rating for this series is a 6 out of 10. There are times when I've had some fun, but my overall experience with it made it feel just passable. Knowing Hollywood though, they're not gonna give up on old Stretch that easily. One way or another, they will find a way to actually turn Stretch Armstrong into a prominent franchise. It's not like they're just gonna look at that Netflix cartoon and just say, mission complete, and call it a day. And keep in mind, Stretch Armstrong is owned by Hasbro, and we know that Hasbro has a major market in the entertainment section where they would go and have prominent franchises already. Like, they have already turned many of their toys into massive entertainment franchises like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and My Little Pony. And I'm just saying, people, if they could turn them into major entertainment legends, then who's to say that Stretch Armstrong won't be the next movie star? You know, honestly, I think I've been talking about the show way too much and have Stretch Armstrong and the Flex Fighters in my mind for so long that Honestly, I thought this thing would be like a rubber band or something. You know, like Stretch in the series. Yeah, you know what? Don't believe in everything you watch on Netflix. See you later, dudes!
But I realize now, despite all the danger, that I would not want to have it any other way.